Welcome back. Pattern making and sewing tips. Thank you. Click the bell for notifications of new uploads when you subscribe. This is pattern SGCC0419, Steampunk Gypsy, Casual City, 4th month 2019. Hi, hello, trademark. Yeah, it has been a while since our last video. No, it wasn't a vacation, nor was it a break. You and I know how life does not go the way we want. So we do what we do and move on, right? Anyways, we are with pattern number SGCC0419. Right? I got this, of course, from Pinterest. It's a little different, of course, from the one I saw. Of course, you gotta change it so you don't get sued. All right, preparations as we usually do. We need our slopers, of course, right? Our paper, 54-inch wide if you can get it. You don't know where to go, check Staples. You can go online as well and find a nice price for paper. You can get pattern paper from moods.com. Right, moods.com. They're located in New York City, but you can order some pattern paper for a very nice price online. Your pencils and your rulers. Check the videos in my playlist of measurements and slopers. Several videos in there. I explain about the rulers, paper, and all of that stuff. All right. As I said before, we start with the back. And the back of this one is very easy, so it makes it much easier. All right. On our garment length and width sheet of paper, place the back sloper slightly off the center. So on the paper, find the center of the paper and draw a line from the top down to the bottom, like this here, right? And you're going to place the sloper slightly off center, all right? Because the back of the garment has more than the front, right? And it's the swing of it has more than the front, the flare of it. Okay. All right. Now, after positioning your sloper, keeping it still with a weight, you can use anything for weight, long as it's heavy enough to keep your sloper from sliding all over the place. You know, paper on paper, it slides. Trace the sloper, adding the design lines. Also remember the notches. And also make notches for the waistline on the center back and the side seams, right? It's here, here. Put notches there because, you know, we're using a bodice sloper, not a hip sloper. I should have used a hip sloper. It would have been much easier because the hips would have been there already. All right, my mistake. It's been a while. All right. And of course, the amount of flare is your choice. Just use the back hip measurement as a reference. And of course, go to the videos and measurement slopers playlist. There's one in there that includes the math on getting the back hip measurement that we would use for a sloper. So, you know, just check that video for the how to do the math to get that back hip measurement. Okay. And then you would put that on the center line. Like from that center line, you'd find that whatever your measurement, if your measurement is 10.5 inches, well, then putting 10.5 on that center line would be right at 5.25 inches on each side. So 5.25 to here, 5.25 to there. That will give you an idea how far you want your flare to be, because you don't want your flare to touch the hips. You want it to go further than the hips. That's why I say a good number to start with, about 5 inches added to whatever that hip is, right? So that's a good starting point. That should give you uh, uh, a basic amount of flare. But if you want yours to be really, really flary, well, you make this angled line here go further out, and this one as well go further out. All right. All right. So I meant to take this sloper away. Once you trace the sloper, you don't need to keep it there. And once you got your sloper and design lines, you don't need a sloper anymore. You can move it away. But this is computer, and I just can't slide it away. All right. Now the basic design lines are drawn. We just have a little manipulation to do. The dart space measurement will be moved to the center back waist point. So if it is 1 inch, then mark 1 inch from center back on the waist. So if your sloper has a dart in it, like this, you're going to measure that space. So if it's 1 inch, whatever the space measurement is, you go to the line, your design line, to where the waist point is, because remember, you put that notch there so you know where it's at. And you can draw a line straight from notch to notch if you want to, because you need to be on that waistline. And from your drawn line, you measure over 1 inch. Then you take your hip sloper, either one of these two here, and you put the curved part here, and you want to fade it back up into that straight center back line. You want to fade it in there gradually. You don't want it to make a point, because if you fade it in and you have a point where your new line touches the original line, it's going to make a pucker. And when you sew it, you'll have this little pucker on your dress, this little point sticking up. You don't want that. So make sure your line fades gradually back into it. All right. What you can do is, like, all right, you take your hip sloper, you put the curved part here, and make a line coming out, and it goes up there. And your line has a little pucker. You take your hip sloper and you put the curved part, not the big curved part, the small curved part, like this section here, and you put that here. So any pucker that's there, if you have a pucker, you would just go ahead and draw that, use that curve, and cut that pucker right off with a nice gradual line that fades back into your original line there. Okay. I'm trying not to. My voice sounds like rushing water, huh? All right. As I said, the back of the garment is longer than the front. Also, as the design indicates, the front length is mid thigh, and the back would be 12 inches or more, your choice, longer. The side seam will be raised at half of the number between the front and back hem. So if it is 12 inches, the side seam is raised 6 inches. 16 inches, side seam raised 8 inches, etc., etc., etc. So, all right, what I'm talking about is this. Wait, let me go back. Here, the front is shorter. This front length right there should be mid thigh. All right. Let me not go too fast because I do talk about that in here. So, all right. So stick with the math here. All right. We didn't do the front, so we don't know how much to raise that. So just raise it 6 inches. All right. Raise it up 6 inches anyway, because this is on paper. You can easily correct it and change it as we go along. Okay. But the numbers that I use, basic. So just raise it 6 inches for now. All right. And this is what we would have. The design line, we change the center back. We got our notches for the waist. Notch for the side seam. You don't really need that notch. I put it there anyway as a habit. Shoulder notch, you don't really need that one. And this notch. This one you do need, because that shows you that the curved line from the waist stops right there. You want this section to match up properly. All right, because it's a curve. If it's not matched up, you get this wavy, puffy look. Of course, check all measurements, check all your notches before we get to the front. Keep your draft. So once you draw this on your paper, you're going to trace this off onto a separate piece of paper and keep this first design that we did. It might seem like a lot of work, but trust me, this is how you want to get used to making patterns, because it makes your work a whole lot easier. And you might have to use maybe just this back part in the future for another garment. You know, the back is similar. The front and everything else could be different, but the back is similar. You can just trace this and then do what you need to do to make it different. All right. Also, I have videos and measurements about grade. Oh no, I didn't do the video on grading. Okay, I have to do that. Anyways, all right, now we're at the front, right? Same as the back. Get your paper, make sure it's wide enough and long enough. Trace the sloper onto it. You do your design lines. So when you do the design line, the first one you want to do is just this. Excuse me, right here. You're just going to do this. And this side seam here, you're going to get that measurement from the back that we just did. So wherever you made this measurement, I'm sorry, that's the center back. The side seam is right here. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Whatever you made your side seam here, remember, because we raised it 6 inches. So whatever this number is, you're going to use that same number for the front side seam. And as you see, from there, we're continuing up, right? So remember I said this is mid thigh, and that depends on what size you're making it. That's from 16 to 18 inches from the waist, right here. And how did I get that number? Two different size numbers I'm using. So 8 inches from the waistline for the hip, and 9 inches from the waistline for the hip. And then you go an extra 8 or 9 inches and you get 18 or 16 inches from the waistline to here. Because basically the knee is 22 inches from the waist. You see? So this is above the knee, somewhere around mid thigh, right? Remember, you can make this longer. It can be too long because it's easy to cut it shorter. But if it's too short, well, you have a problem, okay? And this isn't a dress. It's you can use it for a dress, yeah. But the design that I got it from, it's like a blouse, a long blouse. Almost a jacket, really. You can make it as a jacket. You can make it as a long blouse. or you can make it as a dress. It's up to you, or however you want to wear it. All right. So this here, 16 or 18 inches, depending on your size, could be longer depending on your size. Mid thigh, right? Now the dart here on your front sloper, yeah, will be used to separate this the center front and the side front pieces. So with the hip curve, right? With the hip curve, you're gonna put the curve part, hip curve, this. You're gonna take this curve part right there, or this one. I prefer you use this one. It makes all your designing a whole lot easier because it has this plus more. So I prefer you get that one. Okay, you're gonna take that curve, you're gonna put it here at the top of this dart, and you're going to move it so that it'll come, when you curve and draw that line, it touches down there at the bottom part of your armhole. You draw that curve line, right? And you make sure you put a notch right at the apex of the curve. Sorry, at the apex of the curve right here. Right, and then we're going to use the existing dart line, right? So you don't have to do nothing there, but from here, where the dart ends, you draw a flare line, for the flare. And then, of course, you already have this, so that's for that. Put your waist notches right there. Then the front, you do the same thing. This line is already drawn, so you just come here and do the flare line like that from the dart. All right, this will be a built-in dart, so we don't have to trace. We already traced the dart actually on the side front piece and then on the center front piece. So the dart is there, so when you stitch it, it automatically will close. Built-in dart, okay? Then, of course, you leave this all together on one sheet of paper, and you would trace off this piece with the darts. Then you trace off this piece with the darts. Make sure you get this dart on the apex here of the curve that we did. All right, and the waist darts. All right. All right. And tracing, make sure to include. All right, I said that. All right. Yeah, and that notch is 1/4. This notch right here is 1/4 to 1.5 inch above the top of this dart. So the top of the dart is here. You would just go 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches, and you would make that notch. All right. And that number is a reference number. So basically you really want to put it at the apex of the curve. That's the highest point of the curve right here. The highest point of this curve, you want to put a notch there. Why? To prevent puckers. All right. Now, here we are. These are the two pieces you should have. All your notches there. All right. It's traced on the separate sheets of paper, right? Keep the draft for the future. Okay, now we have the sleeve. Same thing. Put your paper down, put your sleeve sloper on the paper, and you trace it. You're going to draw a line, the bicep line from these corners here. Draw it straight across, just like this, leaving a lot more on the front, on either end, front and the back. Drawing that line over there, right? Make sure you got your 2 notches for the back, a single notch for the front. Um, this shoulder notch isn't important because you'll find out. Okay. All right. Okay. And okay. Find the center line. The space you want to find a center line on is just from this corner to that corner on this line. You measure it, find the center. Of course, you measure it, divide it by 2. That gives you the center mark. You mark it, then you do the same thing with your cuff. You measure it, divide that number by 2. That gets you the center, mark it, and you draw a line going through the entire thing. And you get that. Now, because we already do this manipulation here, but you should have this line going across and this line going through the whole dart. All right. All right, on the center line, only the cap section. Make 3 marks with 1/4 inch space between them. Then use a ruler to make a slightly angled line from first mark and centered line on the centered line closest to bicep line to the front and back cap. Okay, what that means is right here, this is the center line, bicep line. From the bicep line on the center line at about 1.25 inches, you make a mark. Right? And then you keep doing that. You do another one 1.25 inches away. You do another one 1.25 inches away. You do another one. Oh no, you just need 3 marks, right? So it's 1, 2, 3 marks. 1.25 inches, mark, 1.25 inches, mark, 1.25 inches, and you mark. Right? Only in the cap section. Use the see-through ruler. That's to be the straight one here. That's why I love the see-through rulers. You can lay it right on top and you can see your marks and all your lines and line them up nice and straight. It's like a square. You can use this for a square as well. So whenever I say square, that's what you're going to do. You're going to put your lines, match them up with the see-through ruler lines, and you can get square lines all the time. Sounds like a rhyme. All right. Now, once you do that, all right, you're going to use the see-through ruler and you're going to put it on this center line, right? And sorry. I'm not reading this. I wrote it, so I kind of know what it is, and so I'm sorry. Now, once you get this mark here, you're going to draw an angle line straight with the see-through ruler up to there. And then you're going to do another angled line, slightly angled. Not a V. You don't want a V. You want a slightly angled line because you want to keep these manipulations we're going to do in this section of the cap. You don't want it to be in this curved part because that's the armpit. You don't want to be in this top part because that's the shoulder. You want it right here in the middle. That's why it's a slight angle line. Once you draw these first 2 lines, then you use the visible ruler, line it up with this, and you make sure that these lines are even. So that means your visible ruler is going straight across, and these lines are both touching front and back at the same, on this line there. Then you do the same thing for all the rest. So 1.25 inches space, right? You mark here, use your see-through ruler, and you're going to go up from the first marks that you did, 1 inch and 1/4. You're going to mark there, and you're going to do the same thing again. Raise it up and mark there and mark there. 1.25 inches from the second lines that you did. Then you go ahead and redraw your angled lines to those marks you made. All right, because everything should be 1.25 inches apart. These marks you first did are that on the center line, and then also the lines that's going to be on the cap itself. All right. Next, we have to cut the bicep line to separate the cap from the rest of the sleeve. You're going to cut right on this line right there. Also cut the cap on the center line to separate front and back. That means you're going to cut, once you cut the cap off here, then you're going to cut it in half. Whoops. Sorry. You're going to cut it in half here, right? Again, cut the back using the lines. Those lines that we just drew there, you're going to cut on those lines, and you're going to get 4 pieces. So you don't want to mix these pieces up, especially these right here. These two, they're going to look the same. One is going to be smaller than the other. All right. So to make sure you got the order, number them 1, 2, 3, and 4. That way, when we do the next manipulation, you already know that's number 1, number 2, number 3, and 4, the order that they go in. All right. So we cut the cap off on the bicep line, cut the cap in half on the centered line, and then we cut the cap front here, back here, and you're going to cut those on those lines, the lines that we drew, separating it. All right. Now, on another piece of paper, we need another piece of paper. Doesn't have to be big as the sleeve, but it has to be bigger than the cap because we're going to manipulate the cap and it's going to get bigger. So we need a big enough piece, right, for the cap. On that piece of paper, on the bottom, you draw a line going straight across the whole thing. You measure that line, divide it by 2 to get the center mark, and you're going to use your see-through ruler, like I said, and square a line straight up, all the way up to the top of the paper, right? Then, on the center line, right, 1.5 inches from the bottom line on the center line, make a mark. So from this center line right here, going up, you're going to measure 1.5 inches and you're going to make a mark. Then you're going to take the first piece of the back, right, and you're going to put the corner, the inside corner, that was the center line, that's this corner right here, and you're going to put it right there on the mark, and you're going to move it around so that the other end touches that line, and you're going to tape it, right? Then you're going to use a see-through ruler. Mark 1 inch space. Mark 1 inch from this line here, 1 inch, make a line, draw a line there 1 inch away. Then you're going to get the second piece and you're going to put it on that line and make sure it follows the angle here. Then you keep doing that and you're going to do the other side, taping each one as you go. All right. So after you do this first piece, you're going to use a see-through ruler, like I said. You're going to measure 1 inch from this line here, this edge. You're going to draw a line with the see-through ruler 1 inch away. You're going to take the second piece and you're going to put it on that line. It keeps it nice and straight. And be mindful of this angle here. You want it to keep going. All right? Taping each piece. You do the back and then you do the front. All right? And be mindful of your darts. Your darts should be, your notches should be on this piece here. On both of these, the front and back, the curved pieces. As you see, try and put the lines above. But sometimes, depending on where you put your notches, these lines might hit the notches. It don't matter, just make sure you put your notches on this section here, down here, because you'll find out in a second why you want the notches down here. And that's what it should look like once you tape everything down, and that should be it there. All right. When you are done taping all sleeve cap pieces down, we recheck before it is taped back to the rest of the sleeve. Make sure both center lines are lined up correctly as well as bicep lines. That's why we drew this line here. So we're going to tape it back to the piece that we cut. That's our cap we manipulated. We tape it back to the piece that we cut it from. All right, once you tape it back, you're going to use your hip curve and draw a new line. Because remember, this is an open space, so we need a line back. Drawing that line too. Draw it. And you're going to also slim the sleeve if you want to. You do not have to slim the sleeve like the design is. If you want a regular basic sleeve, you can keep it the way it is, but and don't slim it too much. Because I mean, if you're not using a knitted fabric that stretches, well, you slim it too much, you won't get your arm in, of course. So, but you do want a little slimness there, a little, not too much. If you're not sure about your sleeve, of course, check the videos, measurements, and slopers. When you get to the sleeve sloper, I always tell you, make a sample. After you make your sleeve sloper, make a sample out of muslin, stitch it together, put your arm in, and make sure everything is correct. All right? And if you're new to my channel and this is your first, well, of course, go back and check measurements and slopers playlist and learn, check out how I do the measurements and make the measurements into slopers. All right, so back to this. We do the lines and the sleeve, the cuff design. I was waiting for that to disappear. The cuff design, as you see at the bottom of there, the point. That point, whatever you desire. 2 inches, 2.5 inches, 1 inches, however you far you want it away from the original cuff. You do that point. Once you do those lines, again, leave this for your draft. Trace it off on another piece of paper. Make sure you have your notches, front and back. 2 for the back, single for the front. Notches up here, I said 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch away from the edge of the paper that we cut, that we taped there. You want it behind the edge of that paper, about 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. Because when we're sharing, it makes it smaller. So you don't want the sharing to be too tight. You want it to be smooth, spread out. So that's why we put the notches here and here, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch behind that piece of paper that we taped up there for the cap. So when we do the sharing, it's spread, it's not all bunched in one section. Okay, because when you're stitching it onto your garment, you want to stitch it so that there's no puckers and no gap. You want it to look like it comes directly out of the seam. That's also in that tip is in tips, my sewing tips. I have a playlist on my channel called Sewing Tips, and I give you little tips, and that's one of the tips there. So we trace it off onto another piece of paper. The notches for the cap. Now, each one of these spaces here is going to be a pleat, basic pleat, and you put one notch there from the edge of the paper. The edge of the paper is where the notch is going to be. All right, it's a basic like a pants notch. Once you on the fabric itself, when you mark these notches and you close, you would match this one up to that one, stitch it close. Match this one to that one, stitch it close. Make sure the inside of the pleat is pointing down to each one. All right, and this, as you can see, this is why you put the notches for the front and the back in this curved section, because of all of these notches. You don't want to get the front and the back notches confused with the pleat notches. So you know that the front and back notches are in the curve here, and the other notches above that are pleats. And to keep yourself from really getting confused, just start from the top when you're sewing. Close this pleat, make sure the inside pointing down, then the next pleat and the next pleat. And you only have 3 pleats on this side, 3 pleats on that side. All right. I wouldn't do more than 3. I mean, you can do 2 pleats, you can do 1. It's up to you. Of course, you would do it a little different if you're doing 2 or 1, but you would do everything the same. Only thing is the cuts. You wouldn't have so many lines if you only have 2 pleats or a single pleat. All right. And the sharing there. Now, the Mandarin collar. It's too simple. Too simple. All right. Draw a line on your paper. If your Mandarin collar, it doesn't have to be a big piece of paper, but enough for the collar and the manipulation. So about 7 inches high and about 24 inches long sheet of paper. You draw a line, excuse me, close to the bottom, straight across, right? You do a mark, right? That's where you're going to start at. From that first mark will be the front neck measurement from the pattern that we just made. Whatever the front neck measurement is, you mark it there. Then you go to the back of the neck measurement for the pattern, from the pattern, you measure that, whatever that number is, you put it from that mark to there, and you make another mark. Then you do the front measurement again from that mark there. On the beginning and end, as you see, you do a nice tall line, 2 inches, right? We go to the next step. On that line that you just did 2 inches, you measure 1 inch on that line. You make a notch, the front and the back. I mean, both sides here. You make a mark 1 inch on that line. Then you're going to redraw this front neck line, this space. You're going to redraw it there. So from this mark here to that 1 inch mark, you draw a straight line. And you're going to have to take the front neck measurement again from here to wherever it stops. Usually when I do this, it always stops a little bit shorter because an angled line is longer than a straight line. So wherever that front neck measurement is, you mark it. You do the same to this one. Always start from here because this will be your back, the notches for your shoulder. These will be your shoulder notches. This is the back of the neck measurement. So from there, you draw that line and then you measure from here. Whatever the front neck measurement is, you mark it, right? So you know what that is. The space in between here is 1 inch and a quarter. So you use your invisible ruler again, measure from here, 1 inch and a quarter, draw that line. From this line here, measure 1 inch and 1/4, you draw that line. From this line here, you measure 1 inch and 1/4, you draw that line. When you finish drawing these lines, you will have your collar. Then you just use your hip curve for this curve right there, that little slight curve on down to wherever your mark stops at on this line for your front neck measurement. Got it? Mandarin collar, done. Keep this for your draft, and then trace it off on another piece of paper. Make sure you put your notches. These right here are notches for the neck. Don't need notches there. All right. Now, see, if you are new to my channel, I did other garments with a Mandarin collar. So if you already made a Mandarin collar, you don't have to do it again if you're using it for the same size. Even if you're not doing it for the same size. I mean, if it's a bigger or smaller size, you can take the Mandarin collar you already used and use it as a guideline for making your new one. Because now you don't have to do anything except for get this back neck measurement the front neck measurement, and then you would use your measuring collar and draw it over. All right. That's why we save our draft, keep our drafts. All right. Review and seam allowance. Measure all seams that will be attached to each other, showing they fit, meaning make sure your shoulder seams are the same front and back. Your side seams are the same for the front and back. Uh, your center front and center back, they should be the same because we only did one. So they're going to match. The center back and center front are cut from one pattern piece. All right. You fold your fabric and you put your pattern piece there. You're cutting two pieces from one pattern piece. So that's why they're going to be the same. But the side seams for the front and for the back, make sure they lined up before you cut any fabric. Your arm, the armhole measurement. Of course, we got sharing and we got pleats in the cap. So what you're going to have to do is pin the pleats close. You can pin the sharing in, not together, because it's sharing. It's not a pleat. Like I said, if you don't know about sharing, go look at my sewing tips and video in the playlist sewing tips, and I talk about sharing. Okay. Seam allowance for the collar, for the front and the back of the neck of the garment is a 1/4 inch. Always. Collars seam allowance are always 1/4 inch all the way around. And for the neck part only, for the front and the back, just the neck part is 1/4 inch. Center front and center back get 3/4 inch seam allowance. Center back gets 3/4 inch. Most people do 1 inch for the center back. 3/4 inch, 1 inch for the center back is good. That's for alterations, for fitting purposes. On the center front, it's for putting in zippers or making buttons. Put it for the placket for the buttons. If you're going to do buttons, you're going to have to stitch a 1 inch. Not stitch. Yeah, you're going to have to use a 1 inch piece of fabric, the length of the center front, and you're going to stitch that on for a placket for buttons. But the one I just did is for a zipper. You can use of course, an open end zipper. That's a jacket zipper. That's what they call an open end zipper, a jacket zipper. Okay, that's why you need a 3/4 inch seam allowance. All other seams are a 1/2 inch. Oh, I didn't put it on here. The hem is a 1 inch seam allowance for the hem. 1 inch seam allowance. It can be a 1/2 inch. I do 1 inch because that's what I'm used to. For skirts and dresses, I always do a 1 inch hem. But you can do a 1/2 inch hem for a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the hem. It does matter for fitting purposes, of course. If you have a 1 inch hem and you need to just raise it, you can raise it. If you need to drop it a 1/2 inch, if you need to drop it 3/4 inch, you have it. So, but a 1/2 inch hem is still good. 1/2 inch seam allowance for everything else besides the center front, center back, and the neck and the collars. All right. And the cuff is that 1/2 inch for the cuff is going to be a roll hem. You're going to fold it a 1/4 inch and then fold it another 1/4 inch and then stitch it. That's what they call a rolled stitch. A 1/4 inch rolled stitch for the cuff. All right. Of course, rewind, pause as you go along for your speed. If there's anything I've missed, please ask about it in the comment section. All right. Look out for this logo because one day you will see it around the world. Sakaya Michael, that's me. Subscribe. like the videos, hit the bells for notifications of new videos. And like I said, please comment. Let me know how I'm doing. And look out for the Patreon account. I'm going to open it up because I don't like begging for money. That's why I haven't opened my Patreon account. But I need help. So thank you, everyone. And I will see you in the next video.